Throughout the years, Konami's released a myriad of different skills for a variety of different characters. But the thing is, not every single one of those characters actually ended up getting a fully fledged deck from Konami. And that's really weird because a lot of these characters actually got enough support in order to make them a bona fide strategy. Characters that come to mind include the likes of Bandit Keith, Bond, hell, even Chumley has enough to make him a deck. So that got me thinking, what would it look like if Konami actually ended up making all these characters a bona fide strategy in speed duels? And that's exactly what we're trying to explore in this series of mine. So essentially the gist of it all is that I'm going to be taking every single character that has a skill in speed duels but doesn't actually have a bona fide strategy actually built in a speed duel box and or a starter deck. And I'm going to try and build a strategy based around what skills they have available to them. But the catch is, the deck that I built for these characters can only include cards included in speed duels. Additionally, it has to make sense with the character in mind. That means that a character like Bandit Keith shouldn't be playing a card like Jinzo in his deck just because it wasn't a card that was like related to him in the anime, if that makes sense. And finally, the deck I built for these characters should also make sense with the skill in mind as well. But now that we have our restrictions set in place, I would like to ask you guys that if you do end up enjoying today's video, then I would really appreciate if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way of supporting me and I greatly appreciate it. But enough rambling on my side, let's hop on to Dueling Book now. Alright guys, so welcome back, and as you can see, today we are covering none other than Tristan Taylor, and oh my goodness, so him as a character was a absolute nightmare to work with just because Konami really didn't give us all that much to work with as a character. So this is why we have this monstrosity in front of you that you can see right now. One thing I did want to go and premise real quick is that I did end up making two separate decks for Tristan, and I want to go and cover them both fairly fast just because realistically there isn't all that much depth that went into making each of these character decks. But before we do get started, let's go and give Tristan's skill a quick read just so we can understand what exactly the deck is trying to accomplish, if at all anything. Alright then, so Tristan's skill is Even the Odds, and this skill reads, activate the skill only if your opponent controls exactly 3 cards and you control no cards. That's a terrible activation condition, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. So, the skill continues. During your main phase, you can add 1 card from your deck to your hand, then place 1 card from your hand to the bottom of the deck. This skill can only be used once per duel. Essentially, the skill is a generic skill that works for any deck you can imagine, so there's that. Alright then, so let's go ahead and talk about Tristan's actual deck. And this one's modeled after the Big 5. So essentially what I ended up doing here is that I took every single card that Tristan had available to him from the Big 5 deck and went ahead and transferred it onto here. Everything you see on the very top is cards that he had available to him during the duel. I forgot against who exactly, but this is the deck he used when he was under control of the Big 5. Lily, Jinzo, Magician of Faith, Nightmare Penguin, Legendary Fisherman, Legendary Ocean, Most Reborn, Polymerization, Premature Burial, and Sebek's Blessing. Genuinely, there's like no cohesion whatsoever with these cards whatsoever. And everything down here in the bottom is pretty much cards that I tried substituting kind of to some level. So we have Shard of Greed here to go ahead and replace Pot of Greed. We have Malevolent Catastrophe replacing Heavy Storm. We have Wild Tornado replacing, what was it, Driving Snow. After that, we also had cards like Golden Ladybug and Solemn Wishes trying to replace cards like Spring of the Rebirth and Hysteric Fairy. And I guess to some extent, Gravity Bind. I did consider adding in Swords of Revealing Light as well, but at this point, it's getting a bit excessive. As for the monsters, we have cards like Mechanical Chaser and Spell Canceller replacing cards like Robotic Knight and Machine King. We had Mobius kind of replacing cards like Catapult Turtle and Deep Sea Warrior. We had Sword Stalker trying to replace Judge Men, and Despair from the Dark trying to replace Berserk Dragon. As you can see guys, it's extremely difficult to try and like replicate the Big 5 deck. But if you want to go and try it out for yourself, here's the deck, go nuts, have fun, let me know how it goes for you guys. But let me go ahead and show you my take on what a Tristan deck would potentially look like. Alright guys, so here is my personal take on what a Tristan deck would look like. And as you can see, it's a bit nutty, like it's all over the place. So do bear with me. I took inspiration from a ton of different places in order to build this monstrosity you can see right here. First off, the main focus of this deck is built as a fusion-based strategy around cards like Reascension and Skull Knight, and I do have a reason for these two cards in particular. And because of that, we do have cards like the Warrior Digrapher, Spirit Ryu, Tainted Wisdom, and finally Ancient Brain as the fusion materials for these cards. Additionally, we do have God of the Third Eye and King of the Swamp in order to make fusion of these cards somewhat easier. But then we move on to the other monsters. We have Absolute Crusader, Voltic Kong, Giant Orc, and Injection Fairy Lily. Now, as to the reason why we have these cards in particular. So, first off, Absolute Crusader, Voltaic Kong, and Giant Orc are all cards that are part of Tristan Taylor's level up reward list in Duel Links. Yes, I had to go out of my way to look into Duel Links to see if I can't find any sort of inspiration to what exactly I could do with this character. As for Injection Fairy Lily, the main reason we have her here is because it's one of the cards that the Big Five had in their deck, so it's a generic enough card that we can fit her into this deck as well. Not only that, but in the anime, Tristan also did play a card like Command Fairy or something like that. It's like a fake card that doesn't exist that kind of replaces Injection Fairy Lily. So for that very reason, I think she still fits in this deck. Now, as to why exactly I based it off of Ryu Senshin and Skull Knight. In the Virtual World arc, Tristan had one dedicated boss monster, that being Super Robo Ryaru. And if you're familiar with this card, this is what he looks like. It's a cool card. Unfortunately, we didn't get it in SpeedDuel. Again, surprised we didn't get it. So Ryu Senshin kind of looked and kind of fit the vibe of this card. Also, it's a card that didn't have any character associated with it. And I decided, fuck it. Well, let's give it to Tristan. But now for the other card. So one of the cards that I realized that Tristan had in his deck when I was looking at the wiki was Garma Sword of Oath, which seems kind of like a random card to just go ahead and bring up. But this card goes ahead and summons Garma Sword, which is this card right here, Garma Sword. And I don't know, to me, these kind of look similar-ish. So if he had it in his deck in the virtual world, why not try to replicate it somehow in this deck as well? The jumps and leaps I had to take in order to develop Tristan's deck was ridiculous, but in the comment section below, give me your thoughts. What would you have personally done? Specifically, keep in mind using only cards in the SpeedDuel pool. Moving on to the spell and trap cards, we have Fusion Recycling Plant for the said strategy we ended up developing for him, Block Attack, and Double Snare as cards he had available to him in his actual deck during that duel. Nobleman of Extermination, it kind of just, I thought, fit him as a character. Polymerization, of course, and Monster Reborn as another nod to the Big Five deck he had available to him. It's a generic enough card, and it kind of fits him as a character as well. Moving on to the trap cards, we have Battle Guard Rage and Skill Successor as the nod to the fact that he had the Battle Guards as kind of cards that were associated with him and Joey. Unfortunately, neither one of the Battle Guards are available in SpeedDuels, which is a shame. I don't know why Konami didn't take the time to print those cards. It's such a miss on their side. Moving on, we have Jar of Avarice for this sheer fact that if your opponent outs your fusion monsters and or you need some of the materials back, you can activate this card to recover them. Also, as another nod to Pot of Greed, kinda. Every character had it in their deck, so give them some version of it. Kind of makes sense in this deck. And finally, we have Rising Energy as a card that kind of just fits him as a character broadly, I feel like the latent potential of Tristan. And that's pretty much the main deck. As for substitutes you could add into this deck if you for some reason want to try it out for yourself, I would say that you could add cards like Bashing Shield, Rhoda, Hammershot, and Prideful Roar as more generic cards for your deck to make it feel less fragile if you want to replace cards like Block Attack and or like Snare Attack. But additionally, I would say that you would probably benefit from adding in a warrior package to his deck. Cards like Sasuke Samurai, Goblin Attack Force, and DD Warrior Lady make a lot of sense in tandem with like the Rhoda and cards like Battle Guard Rage. I feel like that's a better route to take if you do decide to build this strategy. This was a rough one. Alright guys, so if you did enjoy today's video and would like to support me, then leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It's the best way of doing so. Also, if you're a big fan of SpeedDuels and or like the format as a whole, then subscribing to the channel is one of your best options you can do. I do tons of different stuff regarding SpeedDuels, from developing my own SpeedDuel product to going ahead and developing the SpeedDuel progression series. So definitely consider checking that out in the description below. Alright guys, with that being said, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.